Today we are going to tour the farm. We're here with Matt Dye from Land and Legacy, and we're basically just going to travel through the farm on each of these units that we've broken down on Onyx and do like mini consults on each one, just to walk through, and we'll just kind of share the knowledge that we have from the past 10, 11 years of hunting it and doing our land management stuff on there, and use Matt for his knowledge that he's brought here today, which is far greater than ours, I would say, but just kind of go back and forth with what we've done and then our hunting experiences as well. Just try to, talk through it and see how we can improve the place for the years to come.
We work with guys who just bought a farm. It's their literally first time on it. They just closed, or veteran landowners. But both perspectives are really good, because when we ask them the questions of, okay, how have you approached this? What's worked? What are you normally doing this? But then I have the eyes of, it's fresh. I have no perspective, right? Besides, hey, just face value, this is what the resources are. Let's kind of reevaluate things potentially, or I love this. This is perfect.
Sure.
Keep it up.
Absolutely.
What would you say with the 10 years of experience here is a limiting factor for the property that you're like, okay, I feel like that's the most or lowest hole in the bucket kind of scenario, or that's the weakest time of season? October stinks here, or we have a difficult time patterning deer. Is that the rut? Like, kind of talk me through what you guys seen from the hunting observational side of things.
I would say it's changed drastically from the first year to now. Early season, summer through early season, there used to be, it seemed like there was a high concentration the first few years here in the summer, and then each year it's kind of dwindled early on. But as late September, October rolls around, deer just continue to start filtering into the farm. So I haven't quite figured out exactly what what the driving force is behind that. Like, I don't know if there's maybe more agriculture in the surrounding area than there was before, and which has given them more variety on food sources and whatnot. But for whatever reason, the summertime, there's not a high density of deer, which I'm fine with, because we're obviously out there doing a lot of work when we can, and then we're obviously not hunting then. And so as the fall goes on, it progresses. But it would be nice if there was maybe a little bit higher density for right when season opens, September 15th. But I haven't quite figured out that exact driving force as to why it is that way.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about just, the limited ag, and the food being all on the perimeter. Is interesting, and that's kind of what makes it really good, like he was saying, late season hunting.
Yeah, sure.
Early season can be good with the beans and stuff, but that seems to be kind of one of the limited factors of the property. Obviously, there's a well abundance of cover, like plenty of cover.
Yep.
And so that's why we've tried to be strategic about placing food plots in certain areas where we can.
Yes.
But the property's, majority cover.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I can't think of anything right now, but maybe as we go throughout the property today, maybe there'll be something that triggers.
And definitely want to look at, let's say, the quality of cover, the distribution of it, how intense some of those areas are that have been TSI'd, what to expect coming back from those, and does it make sense to go into certain pockets and create super dense areas or temporary forced openings from an equip standpoint, to really try and concentrate and hone in where deer specifically are bedding, instead of a bigger timber block that you don't go into, trying to be conservative. But during the rut, if we can isolate some of those pockets, say that's a dense cover, we know does are in there, bucks are going to be downwind, let's see if we can figure that scenario out. A little bit more rhyme and reason during that time frame.
Sure.
Maybe good, but you do have a ton of cover. Let's say the way deer would utilize that as cover, but I want to really look at the quality of that cover throughout the place.
Yeah, there's definitely better quality bedding areas and stuff than in certain areas.
Right.
And we can kind of show you some of that.
Yeah, makes sense. So today we'll start, and we'll just go from what I have marked as unit 1, 2, 3, and then just filter back this way as like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Okay.
And we'll just do a big loop through the whole place.
I like it.
All right, let's get started.
Okay.
So this is the first unit on the east side of the farm, and essentially we're it's a giant block of timber, and we spend a lot of time hunting this. We've killed a lot of deer over here, a lot of diversity going on. Some heavy cedar thickets, then rolling hills and terrain, some decent hardwoods. Right now we're here in like the first food plot just directly past the house, and this leads into that first unit and the second unit that I've broken up. This is where it used to be mainly all the black locust that you're seeing back here, and we came in and dozed it all into piles right here as like a buffer from the ag field, and then also to try to pinch down the deer to go out one side or the other side.
Absolutely. And hunting strategy, food plot architecture, all mixed in one.
Right. Yeah.
I like it.
Transitions food plot.
Transition food plot for sure.
Food is, I mean, some of the name of the game, right? Just depending on the time of season. I was wondering, how far the deer that you're hunting here, how far are they bedded off this to get to the bigger food, this kind of in between, but get plenty of daylight activity from mature deer? Like, how far back in there do you think they are?
So I'll put, oftentimes I have a cell cam back into there, probably another 200 yards on the next big ridge. And, you'll get them there late afternoon, headed to food in daylight, and then providing the proper weather pattern and everything, they'll be here in daylight.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's a lot of daylight activity back there, and I would say that some of them will even bed even further, like 400 or 500 yards, all the way into the middle of the farm and make it here by daylight. It just depends on the scenario. But they're traveling a good distance sometimes, or even there's a lot of deer activity that'll travel from over there this way. So
across the opening into here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So like when we're talking food sources on farm, obviously some stuff is going to be perennial based, some stuff is going to be the fall annuals. But trying to build the strategy around, okay, if we know that this generally is an early season crop, where deer bedded during that same time frame to kind of match the food resource. Okay, is there a north slope here? Does it have the adequate cover? Is there a riparian area like close by? Just trying to look at, let's say, the features that you're naturally given on the landscape, and then matching those supplemental food sources to work back in to things that, let's say, we can't change or we can manipulate a little bit. But I like the fact that this is going to be continually split, but have a perennial alfalfa base. Even in early season, that September, October timeframe, before you get full leaf drop and frost that hit, it doesn't have to be south-facing slope at all. I really like to key in on north slopes, east slopes, because you've got the leaf component in the understory if you've managed it appropriately, and that looks managed appropriately for early season bedding, right? On the flip side, late season, we want to talk about south slopes, west slopes, that aspect with grain food close by and or supplemented with fall annual mixes, cover crops, and the ag stuff. But here, the closer you can get to bedding early season, the better.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it does depend on when there's beans in that field.
Oh, sure.
As opposed to corn.
Oh, absolutely.
Seems like a much more activity here early season when there is beans there.
True. Very true. I agree with that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, right? Just correlating the food resources and the timing that they're going to be utilizing is key. Yeah. Most times, what is the forgotten aspect is, right, then how does that relate to bedding at that time frame? But if deer work through here and the bedding's close, you don't have to worry about necessarily being too aggressive and hunting the bed early. Just the right weather.
Yeah.
It's just a link, right? We're trying to link this with that and with that, and if they all connect, if they all have the right resources and they're all using it at the same time frame, that's when that consistency of target deer comes in to play. But if that's corn and not beans, then it's like they're not going there, so they're not going to utilize this as much.
Right.
Another really important piece of this spot, I feel like, is access.
Oh gosh, it's
super
perfect.
easy access. You disturb very little.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's a spot you can hunt more frequently without messing it up.
Yeah.
And shot wise, like it's long and linear, but you can pretty much reach out and touch one across the way from that set. And by utilizing the structure from the debris that was here, now dozed up, it really confines where they're entering and exiting into that bigger destination. I like that aspect.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it is, we've talked about it, it's a bigger food plot than you normally want for bow hunting. But because of that
huntable,
chokeable aspect, they choke down.
And there is a pretty high deer density, so it's, it's sustainable for that deer density, rather than being small and them just annihilating it. But
Right.
even with fall brassicas, it's hard to get
Especially
those.
if we don't get rain in
Right, that
August,
too, yeah,
September,
yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
wash.
We don't anymore, do we?
No, it's been years, honestly.
Few years, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Well, we can start heading that way and
Yeah.
continue on.
Dive into some of the
I'd
timber.
love to see that side of things. There's a lot to start unpacking when it comes to closed canopy, where you're trying to hold deer consistently, where you want to bed them based on your access. This little finger ridge obviously is going to relate directly to that food plot we just came from, but also the destination. You kind of have that pond that they can split and go around, so there's this drainage that they're going to basically just walk this ridge right out and dump right into. So to bed them here, really pretty easy.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's, like I was saying earlier, right here, I would say it's an acre or two at most of heavy, dense cedar.
Yep.
Which really the only time that will come into play, I feel like, to their benefit is like heavy snowfall, or maybe if it's really hot during the summer. But outside of that,
Right.
you know, I guess maybe during the rut too. I've often wondered how many does go there in hiding during like peak rut,
Right.
to get away from bucks.
Which is kind of an interesting point that will tie into essentially going and creating the destination bedding. We just came from the food plot and talked about destination food, and that consistency is obviously very important to pattern deer off of. But if they're coming, let's say, from a wide range of locations, the pinches, the corridors going to are also very numerous. So it's like, if we can define the bedding area just like we define the food and the seasonality of it based on slope aspect, now the strategy and the way specific deer are going to utilize a given area, it's become way more defined. So a point in a ridge like this, it's a narrow ridge, but it goes out into the middle of this timber, and you've got numerous ones like this. A lot of trails, kind of the top third of this ridge, dumping right out to there. So very easy, likely place to hold them, because that's going to be traveled occasionally, but not very much during the season. So you could bed them on that face, and when they're bedded and they're actually in the dense cover from the canopies, they're never going to know that you just zip past.
Right.
And so visually, you're not going to be seen. That's a great location. But most importantly in this stand, and I know the future is to do some timber stand improvement, the degree and the techniques we can talk about. But in general, closed canopy forest is going to produce per acre annually 50 to 100 pounds of deer food in the understory. It doesn't take into account mass producing crops, because that's so varied every single year, as we all know, living in Missouri. Some years you got a bumper crop, some years you don't have squat, right?
Yeah.
So understory wise, very little forage production. A deer eats 2,000 pounds of food annually. So it's going to take 40 acres of closed canopy to feed a single deer, essentially. So that means, let's say, low production. But with a timber stand improvement project, you're addressing overstory and midstory trees.
Yep.
Right. So long story short, there's overstory, midstory, and understory, like the layers of a forest.
Right.
What matters to wildlife, both deer and turkey, is essentially an understory. You have a very time-sensitive window when there is mass-producing trees in the forest that, okay, now we care about the overstory. But really, understory is where it's kind of a make-or-break scenario. But to impact the understory, we have to address midstory, overstory, letting the sunlight in. And there's a great research out of Auburn. Essentially, if you 8-acre test site, pre and post manipulation, but canopy reduction of 30%. So a 70% canopy forest, so still definitely a forest, more of like a woodland type setting, but 30% sunlight coming in, it produced an increase of 500% deer food after burning, after that TSI. So that's a lot of deer food.
Yeah.
That gets you into 500-600 pound range in those acres.
Mm-hmm.
So you've dramatically increased the food value, and that's important to do across the board. And we may even take it another step and go medium to heavy timber stand improvement,
Yeah.
and we're only increasing the forage because we're letting more sunlight in. But with a forest like this, you have a lot of stems per acre. What you do with those stems, how you treat them, based on felling, hack and squirt, girdle spray, all that, is then going to say how much debris is put on the ground. Can they navigate afterwards? That's a big consideration. How, if you will, how you deconstruct that forest then is going to say, is it used immediately? Do we need 2 cycles of fire just to consume that? So there's strategy and nuances to open up the forest, but at the end of the day, it has to be done, right?
You're right.
The food values and cover is so important.
I think it'll be cool because we have a couple other units that are different stages where we've done TSI and we've done different methods, so we can kind of look at that and see the differences.
Yeah, I mean it's here and down is what matters. And so this is buckbrush.
Right.
Coralberry is a common name for it. You have aromatic sumac growing right here along the margins of this ridge where you're getting some lateral sunlight in. That's deer food. That's great.
Right.
It's a woodland shrub, native, but we want to see that present throughout the entire understory. So at the end of the day, yes, definitely TSI. I think what's going to be important as we tour around and look at the different stands, the timber composition, what types of trees, the density, we can start to then say, okay, I want that stand to be thicker and denser.
Yeah.
And or maybe I want that to be a little bit less because access in, if we know deer are bedded there during the rut, we can be a little bit more aggressive. Let's not go super intense in that area so we can kind of blow our wind back that direction. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of context here to how it gets laid out. But at the end of the day, deer are generalist species. They can make it in a closed canopy forest. Sure. We all see it.
Right.
But I think what's misunderstood is the value that you can provide or it provides by going and manipulating the forest. It's a dramatic increase, kind of exponential scale in managed forest for deer.
Yeah, more food than planting any food plot you can do.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. From a deer's perspective of the timber itself and like what's valuable to them, what's not, we might see that, okay, there's 6 to 7 main species of trees in here. But at the end of the day, if there's no resource, or if they're not dropping resources, or if it's very or extremely varied from year to year, or very a short window in which they're productive, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that there's a diversity of tree species. It's now, if you will, the manager, the landowner's job to say, it's what I do with those tree species. Do I change growth form? Do I cut them? Do I allow them to resprout? Are they better served as stump sprouts? Are they better served as snags and as a hack and squirt or girdle and spray to let the sunlight in to create the diversity in the understory? Mm-hmm. Those types of plants, herbaceous, brambles, woody shrubs that come in, and that's, if you will, diversity that really want to try and create. Because you look around, this is what most of North Missouri looks like.
Right. Timber
just like this. So to create an environment, a landscape, a property that looks different, offers something different, it's gonna be timber management essentially.
Absolutely. And I feel like not very many people over the grand scheme are taking advantage of that.
Right.
Which I understand too. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, but to your point, there's programs in place where you can get funding to
Mm-hmm.
help with that work.
Yep.
Absolutely, and it just takes a little bit of calling, asking the right questions, getting in touch with them, being diligent about it. But those funds are out there for sure. But at the end of the day, it's not going to change unless you do something about it, right? Yeah. It's going to take the landowner initiative, the passion, the hunters we have, be like, you know what? I know it can be better. Those guys are doing it. I want to do it too.
Yeah.
And then just keep your nose to the grindstone and do it.
And it's only, in my opinion, it's an investment, right?
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, for us as hunters, obviously, but, when it comes time to, if you decide to sell the property or whatever, like,
for sure,
it's only making the value even greater.
You create something that no one else is going to see. It's going to stand out on a marketplace.
Yeah. For sure.
Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us.
So here's where we would spend the majority of our time hunting hook. What was that, like 5 years ago, I think, 2018? It's 5-6 years ago, and we were basically just kind of hunting each side of this general road system and his travel corridor. He would always bed early season right here. I mean, somewhere right in here, he was always bedded. Yeah, and we would, if we were hunting down there, we'd see him cross down here. We're hunting over here, we'd see him cross down there, and we were switching each side based on the wind. We'd hunt that with a west or a northwest wind, and then down here, south or southeast wind. And it seemed like he basically had his system down. I don't think, I mean, he wasn't like, he didn't know that we were here, like we were never spooking him. But he
guessed right often.
Yeah, he
just always was using the wind to his advantage. Yeah. And so as we were, but it just didn't work out for both of us to do the same.
And obviously take an area that is a kind of a main corridor, creek system, that naturally, whether evening, morning, you're going to have some turbulence in the winds because of the thermals. So he's got some advantage, right? He's got a point to look out on, consistent winds up there to bed during the daytime, get down, work all the way up through. It's perfect. But then you can only get so deep or aggressive in here to cut him off and take advantage of a pattern like that. And that's where going in and manipulating, and this maybe isn't the best spot, but it will still provide context, but going in and very specifically creating distinct bedding areas, manipulating the canopy and the timber, putting woody structure on the ground in certain areas. No matter what, this is still going to be an area where wind swirls, but if we can create rhyme and reason between destination food and bedding, and say, okay, we've got an X wind, he's going to work through this area like this, and instead of him checking all these little different points, what if we create on some of the very specific points, whether it's north slope, east slope, south or west slope, those pockets of dense cover that will congregate does. And if you know, okay, it's a west wind, he's likely to go from that destination food source. He's going to check that bedding area because there's probably going to be does in it. And with that wind, he's going to utilize this trail. You can start to pick apart a lot of the farm and be like, okay, if I'm a deer, if I'm a buck, and it's fall, rut time frame, pre-rut, that's what I would be doing. And then connect the dots instead of it just being a random guesswork of he's headed that way and he beds this way.
Yeah.
Try and create hot spots. Adam likes to use a reference of like an egg yolk. Like you want to have the nucleus, right? Yeah. And the white around it he's frequent there, but like he's going to check the hot spot itself.
Well, that's what you hunt mature deer enough, you start to realize they're very particular about where they want to bed and where they want to be.
Particular.
And they always are using all the advantages they can to survive. And so like they have the prime lie, right? They got the spot that they're going to kick every other buck out of there if they're in there, whatever. And that's going to be their area. So if you can create some more of those areas based on what you kind of can observe.
Yeah. And it redistributes deer too. It congregates them into those areas because they're going to and want to select areas with the best structure. That's going to hide them, conceal them, but we put them in areas that has some turbulence in winds or advantages to them bedding based on winds and or based on temperatures, different times of the year. South slope, late season, early season might be a north slope, but then all that becomes relative to the rut of hot spots. And let's link them together with the topography and know where you can go to and where you can't go to. So, if you will, wide open timber's difficult to hunt during the rut because they could be anywhere. They could be there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday here. It's like, there's no rhyme or reason. But if you create that dense cover, it gives the ability for them to be selective. When they're selective, now we've got a pattern we can build and hunt off of.
Yeah, and that was something that we kind of hinted on earlier as well with the hot spots. Like when we were talking up there, Matt made a great point about creating more hot spots for basically keeping the deer more somewhat localized or at least strategically contained chaos during the rut. If you can create more of those, you're hopefully holding more deer and more rutting bucks and does, obviously, during the rut, contained on your farm as they're traveling around and spending all their time rutting in the middle of November.
Yeah, and this property is diverse enough where we can already see that naturally.
Yeah.
Like when we go look at the east end, you'll see, it's not the same. And so
for sure,
there's definitely more diverse pockets and more dense pockets where the deer are going to be higher.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So you got like general oval track.
Yeah.
That's kind of wide open timber, if you will, from a buck standpoint. in the fall. You go here because there's not much else to go and inspect, right?
Yep.
But we want to create the road course, right? They go here and then turn and bend, go here because they got to go check that ridge and then this ridge, and they're connected by a little saddle and this. So we've got the pinch points with the topography, but it takes a longer time frame to go around that road track than does that oval, right?
Create more of a Formula One track, right, Chandler?
Yeah, you want to spend more time on your
He's a big
property.
Formula One guy.
Oh, gotcha.
Pennsylvania study.
Maybe poor illustration, but if you will, create some rhyme and reason throughout it so that they're not just blowing through wide open timber.
Yeah.
They're creating, let's say, some more organization to what they're doing, because it all is revolving around cover and does during that time frame.
Yeah, you want to spend more time on your property.
That's it.
Yeah, you want to hint on that Pennsylvania study you were talking about?
Sure. So, great research out of Penn State. They collared 3.5-year-old bucks, GPS collars, and we're looking at movements from October to November. And so in October, within a home range, they were traveling 24 miles, right? And that's not just like point A to point B, just within that month, they were on their feet for kind of 24 miles. Compare that to November, 96 miles, so 4 times the amount of time on their feet. Obviously, some of that's going to be at nighttime, some of that's going to be outside of a home range. But if you create more, if you will, points of interest, cover points, thick, dense cover that are at that time frame, thick and dense. So it's not just because cover in summer time frame is totally different from cover in the fall and winter.
Yeah.
But what's applicable is cover then. Now that 96 or the 4 times amount of travel that they're on, more of it's going to be on you because you have the points of interest and the cover that the does are relating to.
Right.
So we want them on their feet more, which they're naturally going to do, but we want that on your place, create more opportunity to harvest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, especially on, I think of some of those bucks that are more perimeter bucks. You know, we have homebody bucks that live right here in the middle.
Right.
They probably don't ever leave the farm, very rarely, you know, whatever, but you get fringe bucks.
Yes.
And if you can keep them more localized that time
you
of
keep
year.
them more localized, but also you might not have as much history with them though either, because they're a perimeter buck. You get them here and there, but if you will, even if you don't know the deer, but you know what deer are doing, how they're utilizing the landscape and the cover, that buck is still really killable because he's just following the does. He's going to seek the does. If he doesn't have a doe, he's going to go find one. So when you have that linkage between topography and habitat, then you know what they're going to do essentially. So you play your cards right, and allows you to be more aggressive instead of sitting out and being like, I hate the rut, it stinks, they're anywhere, they're everywhere, I can't pattern anything. Now it creates the rhyme and reason to go in and be a little bit more aggressive because they're going from there or here. That's it.
And to go off of the question you asked me in the beginning, if there was something to improve on this place, what would you want to improve? That would probably be it. I feel like during the rut, the bucks that we're hunting are most susceptible to leave the property, and if there's a way to somehow try to keep them here the best that we can, that would probably be it, to just increase, more hot spots and more places for them to have to go check to see if where the does are, and more organized chaos.
Yeah.
That's what you said.
A lot of times food is looked at as limiting resources. We talked about alfalfa early season.
Yep.
That's a great addition. Easy to do, perennial crop that lasts a long time frame. Cover is always overlooked from a limited resource because deer are a general species. But if you look around the boundary of this place, there's limited cover out there too. But let's double down on the cover quality at specific times of the year. You're gonna be on the flip side of that equation. Instead of a ton of leaving, it's a ton of attracting.
Makes sense.
Not all cover is created equally.
That's right.
What's that phrase? If you build it, they'll come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true, but it's so often overutilized.
Yeah.
So guys, we've kind of talked about the idea of cover and having distinct pockets that have got cover. And obviously that's going to be a function of vegetation that's growing there, but then that's a function of sunlight, right? You have to open up the canopy to let it in, let sunlight in to get the energy to encourage new growth. And you guys just burned this yesterday, so the growth was here's a lot thicker and denser, but we can still see remnants of blackberry. The grasses have been pretty much consumed, but the saplings that are coming back is a direct result of how much sunlight's coming in. So in the pockets elsewhere on the farm that are now closed canopy, this is a great example for us to say, we want this much sunlight coming in to yield this response vegetation-wise, which then during the fall, deer are going to relate to as cover and come here. So when we're looking and trying to create those dense bedding pockets, 80 to 100% sunlight is the goal, which when you're looking around here and seeing this slope exposure on this knob, the thinning from the timber 15 years ago plus the tornado, that's about what we're looking at, and it's yielded a great response in an understory.
I can feel the 80%
Yes.
canopy
It's warm
opening.
today.
Beautiful day.
But people get nervous about this, right? And say, holy cow, well, that's intense. But it has to be intense. If you don't go intense enough, then you don't get this response. Then you don't get the wildlife responding to that idea. We can't just say, hey, that's bedding if they don't utilize it, right?
Right.
Might have been the goal, but when the cover and structure is present, then they're actually going to utilize it.
Now we're over here where we came through, my dad and I, and we've roughly got like a 10-acre area of monocultured cedars in here, and we
Right.
came in and cleared out about an acre and a half maybe. Didn't really leave any standing, which is okay. But I wanted to get your viewpoint on what we should do moving forward, when we should maybe burn this,
Right.
or if we should, and also if we should continue to clear many more cedars.
Right. Definitely clear some more cedars. If there's an adjustment just from mobility and usability, future wildlife, because there's so much structure, may choose to girdle 30, 40% of them, kill them standing, and then flush cut the rest of them. When you kind of mitigate how much debris gets down, and then you come back and you burn them, obviously cedar gets flashy when you burn it. You'll pretty much crown out the rest of the other ones too. So you kind of two-stage will reduce that entire stand, but have a lot more mobility throughout here. It's always tough to cut cedar because the way that it grows. You look back over here, you've got 50, 60 stems in a very small area. So, one falls into the next one, then you're essentially got pressure on the next one that you're cutting. So trying to disassemble it, right, in a organized fashion, but then fire will kind of finish the treatment, if you will. But at the end of the day, 10 acres of cedar, monoculture, there's no food. There's
Right.
very, very little cover value. A lot of people think that it's good thermal cover, but really you go into these stands, especially this one, a nice big south-facing slope. With it being an evergreen, you're not getting sunlight penetration in here. It's blocking sun. It's a lot cooler. So certainly on south-facing exposures, a monoculture cedars really taking the advantage of a south-facing slope and just making it zero, right? Or next to zero. But coming in here cutting, burning, and routinely burning, that's a fantastic approach. I definitely do all 10 acres, disassemble it methodically. It's going to take some time. I think it's easier to do it with a chainsaw too, opposed to machinery, especially on slopes. It's a lot of work, but at the end of it, you're left with pretty dynamic 10 acres. I don't mind the dotted shrubby cedar, windbreak, a little bit of refuge if you get snow, but 10 acres of monoculture and there's nothing underneath, that's not valuable, right? So it's not, we can't hate the species itself. It's the way that it's growing, right? Is going to determine if there's value or not.
Yeah, this is
That's the kind of
disaster.
stuff right there. It's like there's no use for that. The low limbs of when this thing was growing, like deer don't want to routinely travel through. They may cut through, like maybe something like this.
right.
Heck, I don't even think that's deer.
No, it's probably raccoons.
Yeah, but it's not nearly as usable as many people think. Look at the pollen that just came off there.
Yeah.
So here's your example of why you leave some, but obviously sunlight. This is the absence of sunlight. There's nothing in the understory, no usage. Here's the presence of sunlight, aromatic sumac, native grass coming back. There's not a seed bank difference right here. This is just no sunlight, sunlight. Now we've got foraging cover. So guys, here's a wonderful example. We've talked about TSI throughout the day and talked about canopy opening, the varying degrees that you can go. So the different intensity of sunlight that you let in. On the left side of the road here, we've got an older forest and not as many stems per acre. On the right side, we've got a younger forest and a lot of stems per acre. These are naturally going to begin to thin themselves out as they continue to grow. The weak ones are gone. right? And the best ones are going to survive and resemble this down the road. Both need TSI because they're closed canopy. But when we're getting kind of the nuanced side of things, we can use different techniques to accomplish timber stand improvement. In a high stem count area, we wouldn't want to chop and drop or cut and fell every single thing, because the number of stems, you'd clutter up the ground, right? So here might be more advantageous to use hack and squirt to move quicker with the number of stems you have to treat and reduce the amount of stuff laying on the ground. Whereas in this one, there's still some smaller diameter things that can easily be hack and squirted, but you can afford to, because the stem density isn't as much, to drop some of the trees and actually put them on the ground here. So you might, let's say, be doing a medium TSI here and a medium TSI here, but the techniques you'd use to reduce that would be different, even though you're letting the same amount of sunlight in.
Right, and we're going to go to another unit here shortly, and we'll see where TSI was just performed in the last week or two,
right.
And it was a high stem count, and unfortunately a lot of the trees have been dropped, and it's created quite the obstacle, I would say,
sure.
for animals to navigate through.
Right, and hopefully over time with prescribed fire, it's going to reduce that down. But initially, if we can address it and have a combo approach to how the stems die, if you will, that's a great approach and way to look at it.
Yep. This is Unit 7, where TSI was just done over the last couple weeks.
The aesthetic-wise, like, and even if you didn't want to see this burnt, clutter as you're driving in or out, or stuff that's 20 yards off the road, you can come here with a chainsaw and, if you will, buck it up and just let it lay flat, and it'll burn up a lot faster, soon it'll get consumed than years down the road. But really, none of that bothers me from too dense. Here, they went across the ridge and laid a ton laterally like that. You're not going to get movement doing this, but for them to cross up through it, it's not too dense. And again, I don't know if this was recommended for your dad to do it at this degree, or your dad wanted to do it. Regardless, if you will, TSI like this, and like on that spot we just came from, is going to favor timber production rather than understory production, just because of the degree of sunlight being let in and open canopy. Because these young trees, the ones that they left in the spacing, as they should, they're going to fill pretty quick. Like, they're going to come, like, crown-wise, they're going to fill back in pretty quickly.
Right.
So, in another 5 to 8 years, probably should have another re-entry in here to continue to open it back up. So, like, in writing a plan, if I suggest to a client, say, I want that to be medium TSI, and I'm saying 50% canopy reduction, I want them to maintain the 50% canopy reduction. Sure, trees are going to grow, you might have to go back and re-enter, but if they continue to grow, then that changes understory plants and development of what you're going to get. If it closes back in, right, we lost sunlight.
Yeah,
Right.
and all these are highly vertical and not much canopy now,
Correct.
but they're going to naturally just...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, that's wonderful. That's what those trees are, supposed to do, and timber stand improvement is supposed to do. But most times, right, it's not opened up to the degree to get that massive flush.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to do it on a high stem count area because of clutter, because of determining, right, the best trees to leave, because there's so many choices and options. There's just not always that, like, blanket, do X to it.
Yeah.
But it's a young enough stand that you can always come back and re-enter in
Right.
that time frame as they begin to fill.
I mean, it is a crop and it has to be maintained, so
Bingo.
yeah,
Bingo,
it's not
bingo.
a one-time thing.
Yep. Okay. So I see some work's been done in here.
Yeah, this is Unit 6, where we've had TSI on this hardwood unit. Pretty mature stand of timber,
Yeah.
say, but less of a stem count.
And really, like, as we're looking across here, like, very mature monoculture almost, if you will, 90% dominated in white oak. There's a few red oaks scattered throughout, a few shagbark hickory, but dominated by white oaks.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful in the fall.
Yeah.
Feels right.
Right.
But you did some TSI work. Looking back now, you guys satisfied? Like what you see, or what's your opinion here?
Well, we ran fire through it just last spring, and I mean, yeah, there's definitely more woody plants coming through, but I'm sure you would say the same. You'd like to see a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look up at the canopy and you wonder how much sunlight's coming through, and I would say not nearly as much as there should be.
Right. So 3-4 years ago, they did the TSI in here. Looks like double girdles and a little bit of felling. But at the end of it, really addressed mid-story, and a few subdominant overstory trees were taken. But the large majority of trees are still the overstory. So you might have gotten some lateral sunlight coming in here. But again, with the amount of topography, of varying topography, we've got east slope, north slope, south slope, all in this one unit. But if you will, it's kind of blanket treatment. But the sun's going to react and come in here differently. But regardless, overstory trees are still dominating, therefore limiting the understory development that can happen. This doesn't mean, though, that's all bad. In the spring time frame, the summer time frame, turkeys are going to be in here. There's enough understory plants that it's adequate then. But let's say if you're trying to hunt the rut and you're trying to hunt over cover, this isn't where it's going to happen. Right? It still has useful application for deer and turkey because there's still mass production here. But can it be better? Sure, absolutely. Especially if the end goal is to have a really thick understory that's going to concentrate some deer and feed deer more. But perhaps we just pick a couple of those spots to get aggressive. And when you're looking at the entire farm, a lot is closed canopy, so you can afford to go and be aggressive. Now we're talking about going beyond the TSI standpoint. As some of these trees are getting to the size, quality, we need to start talking timber harvest in the next 5-year time frame to really open it up. TSI was good, but at that end result, probably not. It's not going to get you where you want to go.
Right, and then with the timber harvest, and if we were to do some selective TSI on this thing, you'd want to stick to mainly the ridge tops, right, rather than since the topography is so steep and changes so much, you probably wouldn't want to cut any of the stuff in those valleys. Right,
in the valleys, not so much for sure. If you will, the top half of those ridges is where you're going to get the most amount of sunlight transmission in, just the way that sun's going to move across the sky. But yes, definitely right.
This one's Unit 8, where we kind of had like an old food plot right here, rolls into some bedding and a little bit of a savanna, I guess you might say, or old pasture, and then timber leads into ag field.
I believe this is probably where a lot of the deer that you guys are killing in the ag field bed late season, right? I mean, this unit itself is rich with history, I'd say, for you guys.
It really is.
One of our favorites for sure.
Yep, my buck that my dad killed a few years ago, well, his biggest buck to date, was notorious for spending a lot of time right in here, and then he killed him traveling down into that ag field.
And again, every time that we can lay out a farm where you've got bedding at a seasonal time frame that matches close food, and that's a late season food and late season bedding, the usage of those areas just goes way up. You get them close to the food, you get a lot of daylight activity, therefore all that success rate is just going to follow. But what we're trying to do is create scenarios just like this everywhere else too, right? Create the rhyme and reason. But I love that this has got a rich history, and it makes a ton of sense. And I think we were talking earlier, Mike, it's like you've got food plots down there, standing grain, but back to our south, there's other food plots in the bottom that you guys have since abandoned. You've abandoned this. You don't have to, for those watching, you don't have to plant literally every single thing. That's not the shotgun blast approach and figure out what works. It's just be methodical, understand what deer relate to as the cover, the seasonality of it, plant accordingly, and first and foremost, the access.
Right.
Then you're going to find that success.
Yeah, and I feel like what I've taken away from most of this, which I already knew, but it's really opened my eyes far more, is just creating more food within the resources that are already here, which is the timber and
Absolutely.
and all that. And
The
you know,
more usable space that you can create out of the timber, the carrying capacity goes up, the value, deer and turkey, everything will dramatically increase. And you guys are doing a great job. You're doing the TSI, you're doing fire, few tweaks here and there. The usability of the entire farm really is going to increase.
Thank you guys for watching this video. We are holding a whitetail workshop this coming May 30th, I think, May 31st, June 1st, that weekend of 2025 with the guys from Land and Legacy right here on the Missouri farm that this video took place on. You guys can check out more details on that on our website. You can also sign up there. It's going to be a fun weekend. We have limited spots available, so make sure you check it out if you're interested and get signed up. Also, check out this cedar eradication video that we completed here on this farm this past year. And we're not completely done with that, but it was a cool project that we started. We're going to continue on doing that this winter, as well as more chainsaw work. So look for more videos in the future on our habitat work and more stuff from Land and Legacy that we collaborated with in this video. And we're looking forward to releasing that info.